Have you been told you need to stop doing what you love, whether it's exercise, running, or a sport? Well, here at Dynamic, we don't like that answer. In this podcast, we'll talk to leaders in the health and wellness space from Southwest Florida to get the solutions you need to get you back to doing what you love. Welcome to the Dynamic Naples Podcast. What's going on in Southwest Florida? Today, I have a very special guest, Amanda Salazar. Amanda, how you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Good. Amanda is our newest therapist at Dynamic Physio, and she's right now at Show Me Strength Gym in North Naples. Amanda, so let's start off with you. Tell us a little bit about you. Where are you from?
Originally, I'm from West Virginia, but I've been in Florida for almost 10 years now in the Naples, Bonita area.
What brought you down to Naples?
Well, we came down right after I finished OT school because we wanted to live somewhere warm. So we kind of picked a place on a map and came down, and I did my clinicals, and we ended up loving it. So we stayed.
Were your clinicals all in Southwest Florida, or were you around Florida in general?
Yeah, they were. So I had a couple in the adult setting, and then I had my last one at the Children's Hospital Golisano up in Fort Myers. And I really enjoyed working there. So I stayed for about 4 years until I moved on to another area.
Let me ask this. A lot of people kind of think that, especially from the north, think that we don't have seasons, but we really have two seasons here, right? Wet and dry. Wet season, dry season. So winter is dry, summer's wet. Do you have a preferred season? Just in general?
I would say up north or down here season.
Down here. Well, actually, let's start with up north. Did you have a favorite season up north?
Yes, definitely. Fall for sure. Football season, and it's the most beautiful. West Virginia is so gorgeous in the fall. All the leaves change, and I grew up in an area that very close by. You could go be in the woods, see nothing but trees. So definitely fall up north. But down here, I'd say probably the 2 weeks of weather under 70 that we get.
So you like the cold a little bit better? Yeah. See,
not the cold that we have up there, but the cold that we have down here. Yeah.
When it's like 60 and everyone's wearing like shawls.
Yes. They have their Ugg boots on.
Exactly. It's so funny. That time of year, you can totally tell who lives here year round.
Yes.
Because people are all wrapped up, and then like everyone's visiting, it's just like shorts and flip-flops.
Yeah. And it's like you adjust. I swear, I think that your blood changes or something, because I feel like we fell victim to that the first couple of years, and now we laugh at those people as well. So
yeah, it's funny. I actually like Googled that. I was like, does your blood actually think? Because this was something that we all say. I used to say, it turns out your blood doesn't change in viscosity at all from the weather. But I think your body does adapt in some other ways. But it's interesting.
Your tolerance probably adjusts.
Yeah. And we're so equipped for the heat. Actually, I prefer the wet season. I prefer the summer, generally speaking. So last 2 summers were kind of brutal, but I just love those like 4 o'clock rain showers. It just, I don't know, it just feels so like tropical to me. I love it. So
I do too. And surprisingly, it's one of the things that reminds me of home. We used to sit on the porch. My mom loves storms, and we would always sit out there when it was raining and hang out and watch the storm. So I enjoy doing that down here as well. It kind of reminds me of that.
My wife and I got into the thing for a while where we were watching that show Bloodline on Netflix. Did you watch that show ever?
Mm-hmm.
It's so Florida. I love it. It takes place in the Keys. And I feel like that it's like constantly raining in that show, which makes the show so moody and awesome. So we would have a rule that we would only watch that show in the evening if it was raining out also. So we'd sit outside basically in our covered part of the lanai while it's raining, watching Bloodline. That was our little thing for like a year. It was awesome.
No, I think that's awesome. I love to theme everything. So I'll do the same with different shows, not necessarily the same context, but
cool.
Pull it all together.
So let's get into your background. Like what got you interested in therapy? And let's talk about OT versus PT. So let's start off there. Okay. I think I know the difference, but I think a lot of people, I think even like PTs and OTs can't really tell the difference necessarily. I've kind of learned it in a couple different ways that OT tends to be more upper extremity, PT is kind of the full thing. I've heard that PTs deal with more gross movement, whereas OT is more fine movements. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of different ways to dissect that. How would you say what would you say is the difference from occupational therapy and physical therapy?
I think it really depends a lot on the setting and the population that you're working with. I've heard all of those arguments, and we definitely have those arguments in different places as well. So in pediatrics, I think there is a lot more overlap, but also a lot more distinction as well. As far as the fine motor, we definitely look at that a lot more than the physical therapists do. And we will look at different things like sensory integration that the physical therapist might address, but they're not really working on that.
Mm-hmm.
And a big one is those activities of daily living, where we are really looking at what are the occupations of the people that we're working with, and not meaning that as their 9 to 5, but the roles they play in life and the different things that they feel are important to them, whether that be being able to do their laundry independently, that kind of stuff that I feel like is a little bit more clearly OT than it is physical therapy. But I think as you move into, orthopedics and things like that, there's a little bit more of, I don't know that I would call it an overlap, but a little bit more of a blending of what you can do, what each one can do.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like an occupational therapist can 100% do what a physical therapist does. It's just, I think it really depends on how you want to concentrate your study. You said something though, sensory integration. Can you describe that for the listeners? And, like, how do you guys use sensory integration?
Sure. So in my most recent experience, in the school system, so working with kids all the way from pre-K to high school, we are looking at how their different sensory needs might impact their ability to obtain their education. So if we have somebody who's really struggling with proprioceptive input, they really need a lot of that in order to focus and attend or participate, we kind of collaborate with, we call it an IEP team, but the teachers and the different adults that are working with that specific student to figure out how can we provide that proprioceptive input so that they can regulate themselves in order to do what they need to do at school.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Sorry, go ahead.
So proprioceptive input, the way we kind of describe it in layman's terms is, if you were to close your eyes and somebody else were moving your hands or your body around and you didn't know where they were, but your brain knows where it is, that's your proprioceptive ability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean,
I bring
it very simply.
I bring that up a lot actually when I talk to people with joint replacement, because basically you have nerve endings that sense this proprioceptive movement, and they're all over the joints in particular. And when you had a joint resurfaced, or in the case of, like I say, a hip replacement, where now you have a metal ball in the place of what was once bone, you have to lose a layer of that proprioceptive input. So you get these people suddenly have like a loss of balance after a surgery, like a knee replacement or hip replacement, and they sort of attribute it to pain, they attribute it to a little bit of weakness, and certainly those are players, but there's also that extra layer of that sudden loss of proprioceptive input. I imagine a lot of these nerve endings do go back, but if you're missing some bone where some nerve likes to live, you're probably going to never recover some of that. So I just think that's an interesting point.
Yes, I do too. And I feel like the sensory aspect of everything from kids to adults across all the different settings and ailments, I guess you would say, it's one of those things that I feel like a lot of people get confused about.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a cool area.
Yeah. And I know with like autism, there's a lot of sensory integration that can help. I know, isn't there a thing where people that have autism kind of crave, I don't want to say contact, but like compression on the body? Is there something like that? I remember reading a book on exactly that.
So so the way we address it is it's not necessarily all the same. So it's a spectrum. So some people are very sensitive to it, and they have a difficult time tolerating what we would say an average range of that input is, and other people need more of it to feel the same way maybe you would feel with a little bit less of a level. Gotcha. So yes, and a lot of times what we see where it needs addressed in therapy is, so we all have sensory needs. You know, if you're feeling a certain way, you might, without even thinking about it, go get a hug from somebody that you care about, and you're provided with that kind of, again, it's a deep pressure kind of a proprioceptive input, where somebody else might need more than just a hug, or they might need it more frequently in order to feel that same level of calm, I guess, regulation. Or others are, they get very, if you give that input and they're sensitive to it, it can cause more issue because they are very sensitive to it.
That's so interesting, because you're just putting some pieces together for me in my mind, because you know, I'm a very hands-on physical therapist, and so I do a lot of massage, you know, scraping, cupping, all these techniques. And, you know, I think any therapist will know that basically everyone has different tolerance levels to how much pressure you can put into the system. I know I had this one patient just recently who was like, I pushed as hard as you can. He like wanted me to just like dig his elbow into his back, and like, and then some people like myself just like lightly touch my skin. I'm like, ow, you know. So and there's everything in between. So that's so interesting. I wonder how pain plays a role in all this. And I wonder, and you maybe know the answers. Does pain change that sensitivity level? It must. It has to.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
And there's so many different ways to figure it out. And it's really funny because, and I'm sure you do the same thing, but the more you learn about this stuff, the more you're kind of diagnosing yourself or noticing it in other people around you, the way they cope with their sensory needs.
Yeah, totally. What was I going to say about that? So, So that we know this from pain science is that when an area becomes painful, basically the sensitivity dial is turned up. And that's how we think a lot of the soft tissue work that we do is working, is by desensitizing. It's not that we're really breaking down scar tissue or anything like that. We're just, you know, putting a different input into the system and turning down the pain dial. At least that's how I explain it to patients. So is that, how would you say that's kind of accurate in terms of the sensory integration approach?
Yes, I would. I wouldn't say that we necessarily address pain in that way, in that setting very often, but yes, I think that there's definitely a lot of, I don't know if overlap is the right word, but
yeah, gotcha. All right, well, so let's get into what got you into therapy in the first place. So what started you on this path?
So initially I was looking into the medical field, whether it be a physician's assistant or doctor or physical therapist. And what really drew me to the occupational therapy was I felt like there were a lot of opportunities to bring a lot of holistic stuff into the science and the medical part of it. And that was really intriguing to me. So that's how I got started. I shadowed to make sure that's what I liked, and I loved it. So that's the reason I chose it initially. And then lately, I've been really interested in lymphatic massage and some of the recovery stuff that you do and all of that. And a lot of that has come from, you know, some personal experience that led me into looking at that as far as a treatment for myself, and then kind of figuring out how to integrate that into what I like to do as well.
Yes.
For a job.
Yeah.
Not just as a treatment.
We've talked a lot about the lymphatic system, you and I, but let's kind of rehash this conversation because I think it's super interesting. So I think we both kind of got, well, I got interested through a lot of Perry Nicholson's work, who he's basically sort of cured himself. I forget exactly what he went through, but it was pretty traumatic. But through, you know, lymphatic massage and lymphatic techniques. So I guess we should probably start off by describing this whole system, because as you and I were talking about before, there 11 systems of the body, and this one just like, well, we're just going to ignore this whole system.
Yeah, he actually calls it the Cinderella System.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. And obviously the body works together. the idea of these systems helps us understand things, but of course everything works together. So it just makes sense that, we have to pay attention to the system too. It's literally like all the fluid that your body sits in is pretty much the lymphatic system. So you've got your vascular system, your arteries and veins, and then you have your lymphatic system. And basically where you have blood in, arteries and veins, you also have lymphatic vessels and nodes all over. And some of the organs are part of the lymphatic system as well. But the thing about the blood vessels is it has a pump, which is called your heart. So at rest, it's not just naturally circulating. The lymphatic system does not have one pump. It actually has a series of hundreds of little pumps, which are really just your muscles. So and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff, so you're a little more in depth on this than I am, but it has to drain into your upper quarter, into your thoracic cavity. That's where things sort of get recycled. And so it has to fight against gravity to get there, right? So just by moving, generally pain-free movement, like something as simple as walking, might stimulate enough movement where you can get like the calf pumps, the quad pumps, all that pushes that fluid up, that lymphatic fluid, and that then it becomes recycled. Would you say that's an accurate description?
Yes. Yep. On.
So, sometimes you get blockages, right? So maybe we can get into like what can cause a blockage of the lymphatic system. You said you had some personal experience. You can get into it if you want to.
Yeah. So I actually was diagnosed with cancer when I was 26 and had to have several surgeries. And part of those was removing a lot of the lymph nodes in my groin area. And that created lymphedema. So I've had that since the surgery. I still have it, but it's definitely a lot better now. But my experience with lymphedema started there. Obviously I heard about it, and I know there are a lot. It's very common following the surgeries for breast cancer in the arm, but I really didn't know nearly enough about it. So when I was going through it, I was like, okay, I'll find a physical therapist that does that. And I went, and at the time they basically gave me a compression garment, told me a couple things that I could do, and sent me on my way. And it was just one of those things I felt like, okay, this is something I'm just going to be dealing with the rest of my life, and it is what it is. So after my most recent surgery last summer, it really flared up again. And I was like, okay, there has to be something better that I can do to address this. And so I kind of sought out information and started seeing a different physical therapist for lymphatic massage. And it was a little bit more effective, but kind of backtracking a little bit, during that search, I actually realized that occupational therapists really do a lot of this. So I started looking into it. And then obviously you and I met, and you introduced me to Perry, actually, obviously not in person, but to his work. And I started really diving into it at that point and realizing that not only is it excellent for people who are diagnosed with lymphedema, but honestly for everybody. But there are so many other areas, and pain being a really big part of all of that. So I don't know if I just got off topic a little bit, but
yeah, that's okay.
So so basically, your lymphatic system can be blocked or become stagnant for a lot of things. If you're not breathing properly, and I don't mean like, but you're not using a lot of that diaphragmatic breathing. You're not moving, obviously post-surgical, if you have trauma, there's just so many different things. I could go on and on, but a lot of that is, if your lymph isn't flowing, you're going to have pain, because if it's not flowing somewhere, it's blocking somewhere else, and that's causing inflammation, which is painful.
Yeah, the breathing component's pretty interesting too. Breathing is sort of like a hot topic these days, but there's actual like mechanical reasons why the diaphragmatic breathing in particular can really help, because there is what's called the cisterna chyli, which is like a collection tubule of like a big one. It's like a hub of your lymphatic system, and resides right by your diaphragm. So if you're actually using your diaphragm, so think not chest breathing so much, but a little more belly breathing, nothing wrong with some chest movement too, as long as you're focusing on some belly breathing. That diaphragm descends and puts pressure on that cisterna chyli and pumps it up to its final area where it needs to go. So there's an actual real mechanical reason why diaphragmatic breathing can help. But let's talk about
one of the little, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
No, one of the little tricks that I actually learned from Perry was, if you're having trouble with getting yourself to breathe like that when you're not focusing on it, if you're just going about your day to day, he has a little trick where you put your tongue to the front top roof of your mouth and keep your mouth closed, and it kind of encourages that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's just a little tip from him.
Yeah. So, but the other thing too is, you don't have to have lymphedema to benefit from like lymphedema massage. So, okay, let's talk about first, like, what does lymphedema massage look like? Because it is kind of interesting. So, how would you describe that?
It is, and from a personal perspective, I was initially very surprised at how much of a light touch it really is. Mm-hmm. You're a little skeptical, like, wait, how is that really doing anything? I mean, you're basically just moving the skin enough to kind of cause a little tug or movement in it. So I think that that's one of the biggest differences in, the typical massage that you might do for, deep tissue or, doing some of that manual stuff. It is a very light touch, but there are also some different things that you can pull in. A toothbrush, as odd as it sounds, is a really good tool for getting the lymph moving. Yeah.
From the few patients I've talked to, I've been through like a full session with you. It seems like some interesting reactions. One talked about like a sudden increased need to urinate more frequently. There seemed to be like a little bit of an emotional response, kind of in a good way. And so it definitely is, it's super unique. But yeah, so anyways, you don't have to have lymphedema to benefit from lymphedema massage, because anything that triggers swelling, and this brings into the conversation of inflammation and swelling, which we'll get to in a second. But just like using your body, like if you are a serious athlete and you train pretty hard, and I think you and I have the same person in mind that probably would really benefit from this, that it goes to our gym.
Yes.
She works her butt off, and
there's a few things with her. The surgery and scarring is one of the things that makes your lymph act up. And
yep. But just like, if you think about what working out is, it's sort of micro tears, which causes inflammation. And by the way, inflammation is good, the stage 1 healing. So you don't want to block inflammation, but the leftover components, the debris that's left over from the inflammation process, that's swelling. So, when you're working out, you're basically creating swelling on a microscopic level. So if you want to recover a little better, a little more optimally, getting some lymphatic massage might accelerate that whole process. Would you agree?
Yes, I do. And, I think it's one of those things where I think we feel pain, we feel things like that, and we instantly want to just fix them and get rid of them. And, I think it's really important to really interpret what those symptoms and what that pain is telling you about your body before you instantly try to just, get rid of it. And one of my favorite things about that I've been learning as I, educate myself on the lymphatic system and all of that is that the way it really does help you figure out what that pain and what those symptoms mean, and how it's not just isolated. You might have knee pain, but it doesn't just mean that, you address that little part of your knee and you move on. It's how everything all works together, which I think is kind of what we're getting at with these recovery sessions, pulling together the pain and the symptoms that people are describing with the things that they're doing with their body. And I'm rambling a little bit, but
it's all good. Do you get the sense that, and maybe you can speak this from your personal experience, that the lymphatic system alone can be enough to cause pain? Like, is it possible that maybe we're treating someone's back pain, we're doing our, soft tissue work, we're exercising, but are we missing the boat a little bit, and by neglecting the lymphatic system? Is that a possibility?
I 100% think it's probably at least part of it in every single case of pain, because if you think about it, if your lymph isn't flowing, all that cellular waste and, the pathogens in your body, all of that stuff, if it's sitting there, it's blocked, and that's going to cause inflammation and pain.
Yep.
So
Great. Yeah. So we have put together these recovery sessions. And one of the reasons I want to put this into our practice is because of this equation that I frequently cite, which is if you want to get stronger, which is adaptation. If you want to get bigger, you want to get better at something, those are all adaptations. The equation for adaptation is stress plus recovery equals adaptation. So if you want to get fit, you got to put the stimulus in, aka the workout, right? And then the other part that we sort of kind of forget about or don't talk about enough is that recovery component, right? Because everyone's so good at go, 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 right? Workout, go to your lunch break, workout, drink a bunch of coffee, stimulate, and then bed, like that. And this like maybe 6 hours of sleep, whatever it is, that's your recovery. So I think a lot of people are missing the boat on that part that's so important is like basically kind of like active recovery is what I think of it.
Yeah.
And that kind of even goes into what we're talking about with breathing too, right? Because if you're just always in this go, go, go mode, that's the sympathetic nervous system working basically. And that's going to be chest breathing dominant, I would say, right? Whereas the parasympathetic system, which is sort of the relaxing system, that rarely gets stimulated in the environment that most of us live in these days. So I think you have to be really active in thinking about your recovery.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, even simple things like making sure you're hydrated, that's technically actively seeking some sort of recovery. And it's, your hydration levels are extremely important for your lymph.
Yep.
What is it? I think you have more lymph fluid in your body than you do blood.
Yep. This is something I talk about all the time. It's all this like low hanging fruit that we're just, coming in to have pain treated. Well, have you looked at your sleep? Have you looked at your hydration? How are you eating?
Your nutrition. I know that's a big one with you.
Those are all these like levers you can pull that can augment. I think of it like a DJ's amplifier. You got all these like up faders and down faders you can tug on, right? And they can amplify the signal. So I mean, if you're in pain, look at those things at least. I mean, at least track your sleep and see how you're doing with that. If you track your sleep to your pain number, if you just make a pain number and like a sleep number per night, you're going to notice that your pain levels are going to ebb and flow with your quality of sleep. So
yeah, and I think a lot of it is just like we keep talking about the lack of maybe exposure to this system and the benefits and all of the different things we've been talking about.
Yeah.
But if you think a lot when you're talking about recovery, somebody might say, oh, I need to make sure I stretch the next day to kind of loosen up whatever, but you're probably not doing something to actively get your lymph moving in order to help that recovery. And that's a big part of it too. There are a lot of things that you can do on your own.
Yeah. And
besides the stuff that we just talked about.
Yeah. In general, active is going to be a little bit better than passive. And then we talked about just recently about stretching, passive stretching has its place and has its effects, but anytime you can be a little more active, this is just one other example of why being more active is going to be more beneficial, because maybe we're moving the lymph system too. So it's all like we started off saying, it all plays together.
Right. Well, because like you said, the blood vessels or the circulatory system has the heart. The lymphatic system doesn't really have anything like that. So a lot of the way you're pumping that is, movement.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting too. Some of these areas that Perry talks about, maybe you could kind of refresh my memory. They're like these hubs of the lymphatic system. I know the calves are a big one. I think the groin, maybe, is that one of them?
Yes. And
then clavicle. Where else? What am I missing?
The abdomen.
Yep. Yeah. Even he talks about the water wheel. That was super interesting. That's like behind the ear. There's a spot right there that. And I like did a little self massage behind my ear. I was like, oh, that feels really good.
Yeah. And he's been saying a lot lately too. I've a lot of the lymph nodes that are under your jaw, it really ties into your teeth. And obviously we all know how much of a role our mouth plays in our health. But a lot of the stuff he's been talking about recently is how if there's blockage in your jaw, that's directly affecting the sockets in your teeth and the drainage there. And
it's super interesting. So and we know that
really integrated into every other part.
Yeah, I mean, we know that pathology in the mouth can lead to cardiac issues too, so it makes perfect sense. But All right. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you got kiddos you want to get home to. Is there any other ground you want to cover on lymphatic system, or we hit most of the bullet points there?
I think we did hit most of them. I think, the biggest takeaways would be, working on the lymphatic system is for everybody. It's not something that's isolated to, like you said, lymphedema, or even though we do like to, it's important after you have surgery, plastic surgery, necessary surgery, whatever kind, but it's also just one of those things that's an integral part of recovery in general. And, if you're having pain, if you're having gut issues, if you're, having some sort of inflammation or swelling anywhere, the first thing you probably need to address is your lymphatics. So,
yeah, I think that's great. All right, Amanda. Well, tell people where they can find you. Is Instagram probably the way to go, or Facebook? What's your Instagram name?
Yes. So I actually haven't changed it to anything catchy or creative yet, but currently it's lymph.recovery, and that's the Instagram. Also, we can give our email, right?
Yeah.
So it's Amanda@dynamicnaples.com. This is my email. But that Instagram will have a link right to the booking page on the website, and you can learn a little bit more all about us and what we're doing.
All right, Amanda. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You rock, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
You got it. All right, Southwest Florida. That's all for this week. I'll be talking to you guys soon. Do you have unexplained pain, or do you wonder just how healthy you are? When was the last time you had your blood tested? Blood chemistry analysis is a great way to stay ahead of any health conditions, and now you can have control of your health with Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is an incredible company that sends blood tests to your home. You can choose from over 30 different tests, whether that's liver function, testosterone, micronutrient, cholesterol, or C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation. It's sent to you with free shipping, and you get your results in 2 to 5 days, no physician referral needed. Use the code DPT30 for 30% off. Go to letsgetchecked.com and use the code DPT30. Did you know that you can get started with physical therapy without a physician's referral? Physical therapists don't just solve pain, we get down to the root cause and keep it from coming back. We also discuss all things health, such as nutrition and lifestyle changes. If you feel that you could use some help, let's get on a free consult call. Go to www.dynamicnaples.com and sign up for a free call. Also, if you like this podcast, please give us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps us spread the message. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.